Women. Your book talks about the women's liberation movement. All right, we'll start off with a baby boom. Wartime always brings in a big increase in the number of births when the war is over. My dad was born, my grandfather was a World War I vet, and he came home and had 5 children in 6 years' time. Really, by then his wife died, and he had no more. But by the way, my dad was a war baby from World War I. I was a war baby also from World War II. There was a big baby boom, and a lot of the babies were named after fallen relatives who had died in the war. I had an uncle who was killed in the war named Calvin, so one of my cousins is named Calvin, named after Calvin Coolidge, no doubt, who was president when the original Calvin was born. But then they started talking about, we have too many people, we must curb our population, we have too many folk. And birth control was practiced, the birth control pill was invented, the condom was put in widespread use, contraceptives of all kinds were used, and the result was a big decline in birth rate. And of course, later on, abortion was legalized. And women began to be more interested in their careers and in marriage and family. With the result, there was somewhat of a stabilizing of the population and an increase, a decrease in population. Women found their pay to be 60% that of men, and oftentimes for doing the same job. And in some places this has been outlawed, but folks, this is still making news. As recently as about 1 or 2 weeks ago, somebody pointed out in the Obama administration, women working for President Obama made noticeably less than the men. Did anybody probably happen to hear this? I mean, this was a scandal just a couple of weeks ago. Apparently none of you heard it. But yeah, this is still going on. Women's liberation movement. The women's liberation movement got started in the 1960s. I think it's now changed names. It's called the feminist movement. The original Women's Lib, they called it Women's Lib for short, they began to protest against women having to look nice. And a lot of them began to wear rags and not take a bath. And, but, all right, I had a couple of female friends who embraced the women's liberation movement, but then they began to get disillusioned with it when the movement began to say that there should not be separate restrooms for the boys and the girls. Even in elementary and high school, the boys and girls should use the same restrooms, and no, they didn't like this. And I want to say this about both of the women who embraced the movement. Neither one of them ever married. Today, one of them is almost 70. The other one is in her 63, a couple of years behind me. And neither one of them have ever married. You can take that for what it's worth. I do know when I was in the Army, a lot of the men didn't like the women who were there. About a third of our outfit was women, and the women would say, "We do the same things you do." They didn't. We went on a 15-mile march, 15 miles carrying a heavy backpack. And I determined, I was 30 years old. I was older than most of the other men and women in the outfit. And I knew, hey, to make it 15, I got to pace myself. Well, right up behind me came a couple of young girls. And oh, they were going at fast pace. And they were just happy and all get out. You know, they would show it, they can do it. They were going to beat us all out. I did not increase my pace. I went about 200 yards. You might guess what I'm about to say. These two women were broke down, just crying their eyes out, begging for somebody to come along the truck and carry them. They couldn't handle it. Hey, if what I'm saying is offensive, folk, I'm sorry, but I'm telling you what I've observed and what a lot of the other men of my generation observed also. All right. The book spends quite a bit of time talking about women's lives, but one thing that they mention, I must, in order for a society in a modern world to keep this population constant, women must average 2.1 babies per woman. Hardly any Western nation is doing this. By 2.1, that means at least one out of, that would mean every woman must have 2 children, except that 1 out of 10 women would have to have 3 children. And if a woman doesn't have any children, other women who do have children must make up for it. Now, folk, I have heard that Muslim women are averaging 8 or more babies per woman. And among Westerners, no nation hardly is averaging that many. So there's a decline in the population of Western countries. Spain's rate, well, among the nations of the European Union, the average number of children per woman is 1.4 to 1. Spain has 1.31, among the lowest in the world. In the meantime, more women are appearing in the workforce. What this might mean, folk, is we were told back in the 1960s that there were too many people, we must decrease our population, we must practice birth control, and a lot of us did. Now all of a sudden, by the year 2014, we begin to realize that, hey, some societies are dying, and I'm going to hit on particularly the Japanese. In the land of Japan, they don't allow, or they don't want foreigners to come in. Japanese women are only interested in their careers. Most of them have no interest in marriage, sex, or children, or anything like that. The men are wondering, hey, what are we going to do? Within 50 years, there'll hardly be a Japanese person left if they don't change their ways, because here's what happens. If a couple does decide to have one child, and this is happening in France and a lot in Japan, one child, a lot of times that one child will never see another child until he turns 6 and goes to school. So he doesn't really learn interaction skills. There are certain skills you only learn from other siblings, you can't learn from parents. And I want to give you an example. I have 3 children. One day, I was playing a card game with my son. He was 6 years old at the time. Now, I was his daddy. I knew he wasn't playing the game right, but I didn't want to, he's only 6, so I can let him win. Well, he started playing the same game a short while later with his 10-year-old sister. His 10-year-old sister got to that and kicked the card, you cheat, and stormed out of the room. Which one of us do you think did that boy the most good? Me or his 10-year-old sister? I think, after I thought his 10-year-old sister. As a daddy, I can't just kick the card and say you cheat and storm around like a little kid. But you learn a lot of things about social skills from siblings. Your sibling can be a member of your own sex or the opposite sex, and if you don't develop those skills when you get older, you're going to have trouble in your adult life or have trouble all of your life. And a lot of times, and if you're an only child, apologies, but a lot of times only children have trouble. I dated a girl who was an only child. In fact, her case, her father left when she was 2, so it was only her and her mother, and she didn't know one thing about relationship. The number 1 rule you don't ever want to break for. Don't ever engage in an act of control, whether you're a man or a woman. She tried to control me. I tried to reason with her. I couldn't. What could I do? Put up with it as long as I could, and finally said, I can't put up with this anymore, and booted her. Hey, I don't like to say that. Have I recovered from it? No, 43 years later, I still have not fully recovered from that incident. So what I'm getting at is that the Japanese are beginning to realize if they don't change their ways, their islands are going to become empty of human beings. Western society is dying. They die when they stop having children. The Roman Empire fell when their women did not want to have babies, and meantime the German women were having babies like crazy. Pick the winners. All right. Terrorism. How about anyone want to comment more about women movements or women's rights? This is a small class. All right, terrorism. At one time, terrorism was a lot based on communism. Oops. Let me get to that name. But now you don't hear much about communistic terrorism anymore. It's almost all Islam. Now, I don't know if we have any Islamic persons in this class. I do have several in my other class. And whether we do or not, I have to be careful what I say. But terrorism is the type of thing that people will do when they see they don't have much of a chance to win, but they're not going to quit fighting. A lot like what Japan did late in the war. When they saw they couldn't win, they started sending suicide missions, kamikaze aircraft. It was a last desperation attempt to win. The type of people who engage in terrorism, the type of people who say, I don't care what the world says, I'm right, and I'm not going to quit. I'm not going to quit my fight. And particularly in the Arab-Israeli conflict, all right, I had a student in the other class do a paper about how the land belongs to the Arabs, period. He might believe that, maybe you believe it. But any other group, eventually, I mean, well, for instance, when the North engaged the South, they said, well, when the South saw the relict, they quit fighting and all went back to business. And the war was over. Japan, when they saw the relict, they quit fighting, and they quit fighting to this day. But these type of people, they might see the relict, but they're not going to quit fighting, and they're not going to quit fighting this year or next or this generation or next. How long has the fighting been going on? For 1,400 years. 1,400 years, I mean literally. And when is it going to end? There are people who just simply will not quit fighting, no matter how much they think they're going to find a way to keep on going anyway. The United States was attacked on September 11th, 2001. Your book shows a picture on page 845. The first plane that hit higher up. The second plane saw the building that it hit was still standing, so they hit lower down. So the second building that was hit collapsed before the other one did. There were 16 terrorists aboard the 4 aircraft, 19 aboard the 4 aircraft, and it's believed that maybe only 6 of them knew they were going to die. The pilots, of course, had to have known. That's 4 pilots. They took over 4 aircraft. 2 of them hit the Twin Towers, 1 of them hit the Pentagon, and the passengers took over and knocked the other ones down over Somerset, Pennsylvania. I mean, I know where Somerset, I have roots in Pennsylvania. Somerset may mean little to you, but it does to me because I spent a little bit of time there as a child. They knocked the plane down when the passengers took over. We do not know where that plane might have been intended for. It might have been intended for the White House, but it apparently was heading for Washington, D.C., where it might have been the Pentagon, another one hit the Pentagon. Anyway, and this led to a war against Al-Qaeda, who was responsible for Osama bin Laden. It took us many years to neutralize Osama bin Laden. And from time to time, I mean, there was just some news yesterday that some 50 Al-Qaeda members in a training camp had been killed, and the United States might have been involved. The United States drones. We're fighting them with drones. Basically, the word drone means a remote-controlled aircraft that doesn't have a person in it. and take humans away. You can make the aircraft really, really small and put a lot of fuel and ammunition in them because they don't have a human. And they can be remote controlled today with pinpoint accuracy. Any of you who have played with computer games, it's a whole lot like operating a computerized airplane, controlling the drone. Again, we had remote control as a kid, but it was nothing like what you have today. You have miniaturization today and higher frequencies and less chance of interference, and you can control it a whole lot better than you once could.